$34,000 at the start, $138,000 at the top. Same job, same uniform, no college degree between them. Almost everyone treats this as a temporary job you do for a year and quit. The pay curve tells a completely different story. This is the honest path of a flight attendant. What it really pays from reserve to senior, the day-to-day at 30,000 feet, whether a machine can ever take it, and the one catch nobody warns you about up front. Let me start with the part most people get wrong. A flight attendant is not a server with wings. On paper, in federal law, this is a safety role. You cannot work a cabin without a license, and that license is the whole reason the job is harder to replace than it looks. The Bureau of Labor Statistics files it under transportation, not hospitality, for exactly that reason. So before we talk money, hold on to that one fact. The drinks and the snacks are the visible part. The real job is everything that happens when something goes wrong. Now the money, because this is where the underestimating happens. The national median is $67,130 a year. That is the middle of the field, and it is well under six figures. So let us be honest about that. But a median hides the whole story here, because almost no career has a spread this wide for the exact same title. The bottom 10% earn about $34,000. The top 10% earn just over $138,000. That is not two different jobs. That is the same person, 10 or 12 years apart. And the field is growing about 9% this decade, faster than the average job in the country, with close to 20,000 openings every single year. So why does a career like that get written off so casually? Because outsiders only ever see the reserve year. They see the low start, they assume that is the whole job, and they never stick around for the climb. So what does the work actually look like? It depends entirely on where you sit on the schedule. Picture a domestic short-haul day first. You report a half hour early, run the safety check on every door, and slide an extinguisher, board the passengers, work the cabin, and then do it all again on the next leg. 2 to 4 flights in a day is normal, and you are usually home that night. The duty day runs 6 to 10 hours, and most of it is on your feet. Now picture the international long-haul version of the same job. One flight, 10 to 14 hours in the air, full meal service, and then the airline puts you up in a hotel in another country for a day or two with a meal allowance running the whole time. You come back, and you might have 3 or 4 days off in a row. Same uniform, completely different life. The difference between those 2 days is not luck. It is seniority, and seniority is the engine of this entire career. Here is the part almost nobody explains, so let me walk it rung by rung. Stage 1 is the on-ramp, and it is wide open. You need a high school diploma. You need to be at least 18, hold a valid passport, and pass a background check and a medical. That is the wall, and it is a LW1. No degree, no debt, no 4-year detour. Stage 2 is training, and this is the surprise. The airline hires you first, then trains you, at its own academy, for about 6 to 8 weeks. You are learning emergency procedures, evacuations, firefighting, first aid, and CPR. Not how to pour coffee. At the end, you pass an exam, and the airline files for your federal certificate. Now, the honest note here. That training is usually unpaid, or paid at a reduced rate, so you do need to cover 6 to 8 weeks of living costs to get through it. The fix is simple and worth saying out loud. Treat it like a short, paid-for trade program with a job waiting at the end, and save a small cushion before you start. That is the price of admission, and it is measured in weeks, not years of tuition. Stage 3 is where the grind lives, and where most people quit before the payoff. New hires go on reserve. Reserve means on call. You get a 2 to 3 hour window to get to the airport. You cannot really plan your week, and you sit at the bottom of the pay scale. Most people spend 1 to 2 years here. This is the part that feels like waiter money, and it is exactly why outsiders write the career off. But reserve is a phase, not the destination, and there is a real strategy to get through it faster, which I will give you in a minute. Stage 4 is the payoff, and it is built entirely on seniority. Once you hold a regular line, you bid your own schedule a month out. The more senior you get, the better routes you win. The wide-body international flights, the lead or purser role running the whole cabin. That is where the top of the curve lives, and it climbs every single year you stay. So let us put real numbers on that ladder, because the structure here is unusual and it matters. Flight attendants are not paid a flat salary. They are paid by the flight hour, plus a per diem for every hour away from base. At a major carrier, starting flight pay sits around $37 an hour, and by your 13th year, it can climb to just over $100 an hour. On top of that, you collect roughly $3 an hour in per diem the entire time you are away from home, a little more on international trips. Stack a guaranteed 75 flight hours a month against a rising hourly rate, and you can see how a $34,000 reserve year quietly turns into a $90,000 to $130,000 senior year. Same job, same person, time and seniority did the rest. Does the airline you choose actually matter? More than almost anything else in the early years, the carrier you pick bends that whole curve. A major network airline, like Delta or United or American, has the strongest contracts and the international wide-body routes, so the ceiling is highest there. A low-cost carrier, like Southwest or JetBlue, pays a little less to start, but runs a strong domestic seniority curve. A regional airline pays the least and tops out lower, so it is best treated as a doorway, not a destination. And at the very top, private and corporate aviation can pay the most per hour, though it usually wants a few years of commercial experience first. There is also a union behind most of this. The Association of Flight Attendants represents more than 50,000 crew at over 20 airlines, and it is the reason the pay steps, the reserve rules, and the layover protections look the way they do. When you read about a pay raise in this field, that is usually who negotiated it. And here is what the crews themselves will tell you, if you ask. The ones who stay say almost the same thing every time. It really does take about 5 years before the money and the schedule start to feel good, and the reserve stretch is the hardest mental test of the whole career. So is that a reason to skip it? Not at all. It is the single most useful thing a new hire can know going in, because it reframes the slow start as a season you pass through, not the job you signed up for. Nobody regrets knowing the timeline up front. Now the honest part. 3 real downsides and the specific fix for each, in the same breath. 1. The entry pay genuinely is low, and it stays low through reserve. The fix is to go in with eyes open and a 5-year horizon. The pay rises every year by contract, so by year 5, you are usually comfortably into the 50s or 60s, and the curve only steepens from there. This is a career you grow into, not one you cash in on day 1. 2. The reserve schedule is unpredictable, and it wears people down. The fix is base strategy. Bid for a base with high turnover or fast growth, where line holding comes quicker, and look for airlines that run rotational reserve instead of straight reserve. The grind is real, but where you sit it out is a choice, and the right base can cut the weight in half. 3. The body and the clock take a toll. Time zones, short sleep on layovers, standing for hours lifting bags. The fix is baked into the job itself. You get the travel benefits, the free and deeply discounted flights for you and your family, the airline-paid hotels, and the long stretches of days off that office jobs never give you. The people who last build their schedule around their life, instead of the other way around. And then the question every family asks now: can a machine do this job? The honest answer is no, and not by a little. Yes, a chatbot can rebook your flight and track your bag. But the core of this job is the part that legally has to be a human being in the cabin. CPR at altitude, a real evacuation, putting out a fire, calming a passenger at 35,000 feet with no backup coming. That is why this sits in the low-risk tier for automation. The service is the visible part. The safety authority is the part that keeps the paycheck human, and that is rare in 2026. So how do you know if this fits? It fits if you can handle a slow financial start in exchange for a high ceiling and a life most jobs cannot offer. It fits if you would rather be moving through the world than sitting at a screen all day. It does not fit if you need a predictable schedule and a big paycheck in year 1, because the first 2 years will test you. Be honest about which of those is you, and the rest of the decision gets easy. Here is the one thing to actually do with all this. Before committing, go read one airline's published flight attendant pay scale, line by line, from year 1 to year 13. It takes 15 minutes, and it is public. Seeing the real steps, instead of the rumor, is what turns this from a guess into a plan. So that is the whole picture. No degree, a few weeks of paid training, a low start, a real grind, and a ceiling that crosses 6 figures for the people who stay and climb. Calling it a temporary job is the single biggest thing people get wrong about it. If this was the honest breakdown you were looking for, tell me in the comments which rung surprised you most. The $34,000 start, or the $138,000 top. I read every single one,